Welcome to today's 5-minute Bible study in the book of 1 Corinthians. Today we're going to finish looking at chapter 7. We've been looking at it for the last few days as Paul answers some of the Corinthians' questions about marriage and singleness. As he wraps up the chapter, he has a few words to say to those who have never been married, who've never been married at all. Now, he basically says, if you want to remain single, that's fine. And that's good. If you want to get married, well, that's fine too. That's good. But the main thing is to live fully for the Lord. He's already stated that before. It doesn't really matter what your status is. Live fully for the Lord. But it does say, I have found it to be a good thing to be single in that I can devote myself fully to the Lord. And I would recommend that to you, but it's not required. Notice what he says about this. We're going to read a few of the verses in verses 32 and following. Paul says, I would like you to be free from concern. An unmarried man is concerned about the Lord's affairs, how he can please the Lord. But a married man is concerned about the affairs of this world, how he can please his wife. And thus his interests are divided. Now an unmarried woman or a virgin is concerned about the Lord's affairs. Her aim is to be devoted to the Lord in body and spirit. But a married woman is concerned about the affairs of the world, how she can please her husband. I am saying this for your own good, not to restrict you, but that you may live in a right way in undivided devotion to the Lord. So obviously Paul says, I have found it good to be single. I can give total attention to the things of my ministry. If you could do that, he says, that's fine. I would recommend it. But there's nothing wrong with getting married. The main thing is to live in a way that is undivided in your devotion to the Lord. So this kind of sums up all that Paul has said in this chapter. Basically he said, I want you to live for the Lord. If you're married, then be fully committed to your spouse and show your devotion to the Lord in your marriage. If you're single, be fully devoted to the Lord in your singleness and show the world that you live for Jesus. It's all about a life of undivided devotion to the Lord. But the married life, the single life, neither one is more spiritual than the other. But whatever life you are in, live fully and completely for Jesus. He is your Lord. He is your master. He is first in your life. I think in many ways Paul is reflecting upon what Jesus said when he said, seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all the other things you need will be yours as well. Paul is saying that too. Whether you're married or whether you're single, make sure you seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and God will supply all you need for the fullness of your life, whether in your married life or in your single life. But through it all, or in it all, main thing is to be undivided in your devotion to the Lord. You know the old cliche, the main thing is to keep the main thing as the main thing. Well, the main thing, according to Paul, is to live completely for Jesus. Whether you're married or whether you're single, just make sure you're living completely for Jesus. And then in the last couple of verses of chapter 7, Paul has one more thing to say. Verse 39. He says, a woman is bound to her husband as long as he lives. But if her husband dies, then she is free to marry anyone she wishes, but he must belong to the Lord. In my judgment, she is happier if she stays as she is. And I think I too have the Spirit of God. Basically, Paul says in this verse that, marriage is for this life. Marriage is for this life. So if your spouse dies, then you are free to marry again if you so choose. Because your marriage covenant is for this life. But if your spouse goes on to be with the Lord before you, if you find someone else, you are free to marry them. Although he says, if you want to stay single, that's fine too. Remember, the primary thing, though, is to live for the Lord. Hope you join us tomorrow as we continue our 5-minute Bible study in the book of 1 Corinthians. Tomorrow we'll begin to look at chapter 8, where Paul begins to answer another question the Corinthians have asked him. And the question in chapter 8 is, what about food that has been offered to idols? Can we eat it or not? So we'll talk about what that means and how Paul answers that in our session tomorrow. So hope to see you next time for our 5-minute Bible study in the book of 1 Corinthians.